Hi, this is Mrs. Roberts. We are doing AP Psychology today, 12.3. Our target is describe some somatic symptom disorder and dissociative disorders and identify theories for their development. I want to go ahead and take a note really quickly to discuss the difference between your textbook and then the current designations in the DSM-5. Once again, your textbook, you're going to see these referred to as somatoform disorders. You should recognize these as somatic symptom disorders. That's how they'll appear here on the quiz. Um, Additionally, you need to know that hypochondria and pain disorder are now recognized as somatic symptom disorder. Conversion disorder is still recognized, but now falls under the umbrella of somatic symptom disorders. So that's our first portion. All right, so question number one, somatic symptom disorder can best be defined as what? All right, so we need to know, first of all, what somatic symptom disorder is. So it generally, remember that section of your brain that's about pain, the touch, feeling. Somatic symptom disorder is essentially symptoms that are produced by psychological factors that make you think that you are feeling pain. So there's no physical basis for any symptoms that are found. Um, and you probably would end up running several tests. So you'd go to the doctor, something scary would happen. Let's say you've all of a sudden gone blind. That's question number two. They're going to do lots of, tests on you to see what's going on. If you're suffering from a somatic symptom disorder, that's a disorder in which symptoms are produced by psychological factors. So when they run those tests, they're not going to find any issues with your actual vision. So you can see, but for some reason your mind isn't allowing that. So the reason why it's not hallucinations or individuals experiencing extreme anxiety, although this can be a cause, that's not the definition. Um, they're not made up by the individual. These are actual experiences of them. And so they're not delusional thoughts. They are physically like feeling these things. So that's why it's D. All right, number two, individuals who've reported paralysis of a limb, blindness, or seizures with no physical or neurological damage are most likely suffering from blank. So this correct answer is right here. It's conversion disorder. You needed to know the definition. So let's talk about conversion disorder for just a second. Conversion disorder is just a serious bunch of neurological symptoms, such as paralysis, loss of sensations, the ones that you see here. Your sensory and your motor pathways are intact, so you test them. And there is really kind of that feeling of no explanation for why you are feeling these things. What is a good example? So there's a pretty good example in your textbook and a really good historical example of conversion disorder. The largest known civilian group of people in the world with trauma-induced blindness were Cambodian refugees. I'm not sure if you guys have studied much about genocides that have occurred in world history, but the Khmer Rouge, following the Vietnam War, really persecuted Cambodians for some time. A bunch of Cambodian refugees were able to escape from the country. They got into Southern California, and more than 150 of them became functionally blind. Even though their eyes were intact, electrophysiological monitoring showed vision stimuli registered in their visual cortex, so that functionally they could see. But the conversion disorder led to them not being able to use their eyes. Blank theorists would agree with the following statement. Somatic symptom disorders are merely outward manifestations of unresolved unconscious conflicts. All right, so we go back to this, and we've done this before. We're looking at different theories from psychology. So what we're looking for keywords inside of here that kind of give us some clues, hints in the right direction. So the first part is we're going to see unconscious conflicts, and then we're also going to see manifestations. So we're going to be this is something that is kind of underlying that we're trying to discover. So we can take out sociocultural because there's no cultural statements here. We can take out biological. We don't see any medical terminology, any an anatomical structures. And then behavioral, we really don't see anything about stimulus or response here. So we're kind of going to narrow it down to cognitive and psychodynamic. So now we've got to determine what would cognitive theorists use to talk about these somatic symptom disorders that we just discussed here. So they're going to say something like it's in their mind, it's a problem with their thought process, and that's not what we see here. Instead, we talk about unresolved unconscious conflicts. So we have to remember back to Sigmund Freud and all of his ideas about what your unconscious, what's going on in there, and what kind of issues are happening and how they can sort of manifest themselves physically. So we're going to go with psychodynamic here. So that's our Freudian theory. All right, number 4, after surviving a particularly violent tornado, Dean experiences a selective memory loss for specific traumatic events that occurred just before and during the disaster. Other than these specific memory losses, Dean's personality and subjective sense of identity are essentially unchanged. Dean's symptoms are consistent with blank, which is now classified in the DSM-5 as blank. All right, so we have to first figure out, what did we read about? So we read about 2 ideas, psychogenic amnesia and psychogenic fugue. So these 2 ideas are basically, let's see, the first one, amnesia. This person responds to a stressful event with extensive but selective memory loss. That's here. Psychogenic fugue is the idea that a person loses all sense of personal identity. You give up your life, you could wander to a new faraway location. Think of like any of those stories where it's a Jane Doe, like suddenly appears, doesn't remember anything about her past, and then eventually kind of regains consciousness of an awareness of what it was. So we go back to Dean. It's very selective memory loss for specific traumatic events. If you've ever done this, like where you completely forgot about one period of time, and some sort of trauma in your life. I had an issue with gymnastics once, and I really did forget. Like I can't get back a good 2 hours of time between like when I got injured and when I got to the hospital. So his are amnesia, right? So that's our only choice. Now that leads us to dissociative amnesia. So that makes A the only option that we've got. If this were a little bit trickier, it's just really important to note that both of these things are now called dissociative amnesia. So they're both under the umbrella, and all of those symptoms we described are all symptoms for dissociative amnesia. All right, let's move on. Kalinda is usually a hardworking, frugal single mother of 2. Sometimes, however, she says her name is Milo, a pop star, and instead of working, she goes on spending sprees at local boutiques. On other occasions, she has been known to say that she's an 8-year-old boy named Curtis. Kalinda's symptoms are most typical of blank. Now, you should probably think of this in terms of the movie we watched a couple of class periods ago, and that we'll continue to watch in class when you go over 12.3 with me. And you're going to remember Sybil, right? So what does Sybil have? So Sybil has dissociative identity disorder, right? Oftentimes called multiple personality disorder. So that's what is going on with Kalinda here. And hopefully that was something that's kind of easy for you to remember because of Sybil. And you can see that she's got definitely at least 2 very specific personalities. That's what it takes to exist within her person, right? 2 of them have to be the opposite of each other. So you see that with Kalinda and then versus Milo. All right, lastly, number 6, early childhood sexual or physical abuse is a common feature among people suffering from blank. All right, so some of this is a little tricky. So early childhood sexual or physical abuse could be common with several of these items, but remember, we're only on 12.3 here. So what we read about in our textbook about psychodynamic theorists is that their ideas, again, or psychoanalytic theorists is another way that you can say that, that their theories are all about essentially traumatic events is so thorough, it's so thoroughly repressed that a split in consciousness occurs. This would probably be better if we said early childhood sexual or physical abuse is a common feature among people suffering from blank according to psychodynamic theorists. So according to psychodynamic theorists, that is the answer being dissociative identity disorder again. All right, good luck to you in your studying. I will make sure that your actual quiz has a better question for number 6. Enjoy.